Hey guys, yesterday I met with one of the folks from the Rock Out Loud Live team for a demo, and I wanted to share my findings with you and sort of give a high-level comparison to Skype and Zoom for the purposes of music lessons. So the first thing that I want to mention is that the intention of this software is for music lessons. It is built from the ground up to serve music teachers and to facilitate online music lessons, and it does have some definite, very clear advantages over Skype and Zoom, and a couple of drawbacks which I will definitely get into. The main takeaway that I think the folks from Rock Out Loud Live would want you to know is that they are audio first. They are prioritizing audio first over video, and if we have to pick something to lower the quality of when the internet quality is suffering, the video will go before the audio does. So it would seem that this sort of approach where we're prioritizing the sound would be a good one for music lessons. And I don't necessarily disagree with this. However, if you don't want to watch this whole video, you should know that I probably won't be using this software. That being said, I do think that this software probably will work well for most teachers. It may be a great solution for most of the people out there trying to do online lessons. In fact, I've had a number of consultations where I've met with other teachers and evaluated their setup and sort of helped them navigate the world of online lessons. And I think for the majority of the people that I've met with, this software would probably be the way to go. I listed out some positives and negatives, and I wanted to kind of run through those and give you all my overall impressions. So the first, I guess I'll start with the positives. The first positive is obviously with this audio first approach, sound quality is prioritized, and the sound quality is outstanding. The guy that I did my demo with was just using a MacBook. It was not the 2000s. It wasn't the 2020 model with the nice mic. It was actually a 2019 MacBook. So there's nothing really special about that mic. And he used a guitar in the demo. And one of the things that he did for me was he strummed a chord and asked me to tell him how long the note was sustaining when he was done. And I was actually very surprised that I pretty much I heard the whole note as long as it lasted, which was very, very long. Just like you would on a piano, there's a significant amount of sustain. And one of the reasons I think he was trying to show this to me is because Skype and Zoom both cut off these types of sounds rather aggressively. And it's definitely a frustrating thing. In fact, I will admit that on Skype and Zoom, it can be a challenge to evaluate a student's pedaling and some of those nuanced things about like pedal clearing and how much they're using and things like that. So for this purpose, Rock Out Loud Live does very, very well. Another thing is that when you play, what you play will not be interrupted when the other person speaks. Again, it's audio first. It's going to transmit that audio. There's nothing cutting off. In Skype and Zoom, something will happen where when one person talks, the other person is sort of muted until the first person stops talking. That does not happen with this software. You can have just a real conversation. You can interrupt each other. It's very intuitive. Another cool thing about Rock Out Loud Live, which I noticed Zoom just started doing this too, but this is worth mentioning, is if you're using an audio interface, Rock Out Loud will recognize both inputs. As far as I can tell, it does not recognize it as stereo. It recognizes it as double mono. They're just blended together. And Zoom does this as well, at least with their new high fidelity mode, which I'll admit I need to do more testing on that. But Skype only recognizes the first input as far as I am aware, which means that even though I have all these microphones, really can just use one of them in a Skype lesson. That's a little frustrating for Skype, but it's really great for this software. So theoretically, you could have a mic on your voice, and you could have a mic on your guitar, a mic on your piano, if you're using a mixer, if you're using I meant to say if you're using an audio interface. Mixer would not have this problem. And that's a great thing because you can optimize the sound for both your voice and the instrument. Another thing, and this is, I think, the big groundbreaking feature of this technology, you can play a duet. You can do duets over the internet in real time. I thought this was impossible, and I saw, I think, Tim Topham do it, where he kind of demonstrated doing a duet in real time, and I got to have this experience as well, and it works. The latency is so low that you can play together. It's I know that if you're using like Piano Adventures or you're using a lot of these other books out there, there's a big emphasis, a pedagogical emphasis on duets, on playing with your students. So this is a groundbreaking thing. and I think is probably the main selling point of the software other than the sound quality in general. Okay, so on to image quality. The image quality looks similar to Skype or Zoom. I think if I had to pick, I suspect Skype might have the highest image quality, followed by Zoom and Rock Out Loud Live and a lot of the other software. It seemed equivalent. Nothing really bad or good. It's just equivalent to many of the other applications. Another thing is there's no audio processing. I think I mentioned that before, where echo cancellation, the things that silence you while the other person's talking, and having to trade and wait, and maybe hear yourself in the mic. I mean, when you speak, you hear yourself over the other person's speakers. That did not seem to be a thing with this application, and I very much appreciated it. It was very natural. And the last thing, and this is sort of a positive and a negative, and I'll get into that later, but most of the options and settings and things to do with the kinds of things you normally tweak are already predetermined. They're optimized for your music lesson experience. So this is a positive for the teachers that just want simple. They just don't want to fiddle with things. They don't want to change settings. It just works. It just comes as is, and you don't really mess with other things other than to select your correct mic. For example, there's no volume. You can't change your volume in the actual application, which is through a web browser. You would change your volume in the operating system. Or if you had an audio interface, you change it there. And I actually think that is more intuitive. On Windows, one of the things that drives me is you can change your audio in Skype, and you can change audio on your audio interface, and you can change audio in the sound settings in Windows. You have 3 places where you can change the audio, and they all affect one another. And that is really, really irritating and not very clear. So the less of those volume sliders, the better. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the negatives. And this is where these are the things that hold me personally back from the software. May not necessarily hold you all back, but these are the deal breakers for me. Well, the first one is not a deal breaker. It is the fact that this is not really free software. It's got a free version, but it's pretty limited, and I don't think you get the fancy audio codec that allows the duets. There's some I guess, a built-in sheet music library of basic sheet music, and there's also a chord chart and all kinds of other things you can display on screen for the student, and I don't believe those are available for the free version. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just in the negative because, Skype's free, Zoom's free. So you really do have to pay something to get the most out of the software. But, I mean, it's a business expense. I don't really think this is a big deal, but I did want to mention it here. Okay, so the next thing, and this is the main deal killer for me, is that the frame rate, if I heard the person talking correctly, the person that was demoing it for me, the frame rate's limited to 15 frames a second. So right now I'm filming in 24 frames a second, which I feel like is about the minimum you'd really want to use for like quick piano motion or something like that. It's really not optimized for piano motion. If I wanted to show something really, really cleanly, I'd want 30 even, but 15 is pretty slow. You don't really notice it with webcams. The other person was using a MacBook, and it just looked like he was kind of trailing off a little bit. In fact, a normal person might not even notice that there's a frame rate issue at all. But I'm using a high-end camera. I'm using a Sony a6100, and I have it connected to a cam link. And this is a high-end camera. Well, actually, as far as nice cameras go, it's not really a high-end camera, but compared to webcams, it's like it blows them away. And the motion of how this camera is interpreted in the software, it's very, it's stuttery. And I invested, a lot of money in my video equipment, and this sort of handicaps that a bit. So I definitely didn't like that. I'm open to the audio first idea, but as a pianist, especially as a classical pianist, where I am teaching advanced students, I do find that the video motion is, it's part of the package here for me. So this is something I don't think I can compromise on. I don't personally like the fact that you can't mess with the audio settings either. I am a customizer. In fact, there's a lot of things you can't mess with. You can't mess with the aspect ratio. You can't change your preview window size. There's nothing you can really customize. It's just meant to work and not have you fiddle with it. And some things I would like to want to fiddle with, and I cannot do that. So that is a negative for me. Another negative is that this is a web app. For me, I think this is a negative, that they don't plan to support a native desktop application like Skype or Zoom. And this, you're going to have issues with this with performance and with like split screen windows and things like that. I really prefer not to be running like video calling software out of a web browser. I'd really prefer to use a dedicated client. But that's how they said that it has to be, and that's how they said that it can remain customization free, is if it comes from the web browser where they optimize everything on their end. So at the time of this video, there are no plans for a web application. And lastly, the other thing that's just kind of irritating is it doesn't really officially support Safari browser. It supports Chrome. And I don't like Chrome at all, especially since I use a MacBook. Chrome is really resource intensive, and I think it can degrade the performance of your video if you have a bunch of Chrome tabs open and things like that. So I'm not a big fan of using Chrome in general. I know most people probably use Chrome, so this is not really a big deal. But for me, I don't want to have to use Chrome, and if I committed to the software, I would have to use Chrome. So that's pretty much my summary of the negatives. The main focus is on sound quality, and it's on the ability to collaborate. And I think this is probably the most important thing for most people. If you just figure the average difficulty level that most students are at, most students are probably beginners. The more advanced the student, the less of them there are. So if most teachers are teaching mostly beginner students, then this software really can move the needle for them a lot compared to Skype or Zoom in terms of giving them what they used to have from in-person lessons. And I definitely think that is important to mention, as well as all of the pedagogical support that this application includes, like the chord charts and the sheet music and the ability to display a PDF, or there's a number of other features that they're working on too that I think are really, really cool. So this is definitely worth mentioning. But for me, I just feel like I have to give up too much of what I care about, so I will probably not be using this software, especially since I did learn that Zoom has released a high fidelity mode for their application. And I don't really think that the audio needs to be that much better for Skype or Zoom to be competitive. It needs to be a little better, a little better than it is. It would really go a long way. But, again, the sound quality for this is very, very good. It's very much worth mentioning. So if this is not for me, who is this for? I feel this is for musicians that want to collaborate with each other, musicians that are interested in playing along with their students, musicians that are teaching improvisation and playing duets and, doing a lot of accompanying of their students. I also feel this software is good for folks that don't want to fiddle around with options and settings. They just want to get in and go. Especially if you use the paid version, you have your own meeting room and, it's a stationary name. It's very plug and play. And lastly, and probably most importantly, considering my particular negatives, it's for musicians who are not very concerned about image quality. So it's for musicians that are using regular webcams or the camera on their Mac, because this is really all you need. And anything that you invest in further than this is not, it doesn't really yield with this software. As where, I'm using a high-end camera, I really want what this camera sees to be displayed in my lesson. So I hope this was helpful in laying out, what I like and I don't like about Rock Out Loud Live. I'll probably be doing another video soon about the state of video calling clients for music lessons, Skype, Zoom, and this software and how they compare. But these are my thoughts. So I hope you all find this helpful. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video and stay tuned. I will see you in the next one. Bye.